My name's Brad Young, and welcome to the Peak Performance Podcast. Today's episode 16. We're going to continue on strength training. We're just going to change it up a little bit. We're going to do the practical application of how strength training can transform your life. And so in the last episode, we talked about strength training, what it could do, how it can transform your life and build you up. So now we're going to talk about practical application, and we're going to look at some workout theories by some of the greatest of all time. And so as we dive into this, on the last episode we looked at techniques like progressive overload, pyramid training, German volume training, periodization, high intensity interval training, body weight, etc. Now we get into the practical application. So in the last episode, you had a link to where you go and fill out and fill out your data and stuff. And so today we're gonna practically apply all that information, and we're going to look at some of the all-time greats workouts, because these are very impressive, and you can learn and be able to get different things out of what they're doing. And so when we try to determine your performance goals, you break them down, just like in goal setting with anything. You break down your goals. Where you want to get more muscular, stronger, you want to get lean, ripped, whatever you want to do. You got to determine them. You got to write them down and figure out manageable, logical steps. If you're walking around with 25% body fat right now, and in a month, you're not going to cut that down to single digits. You'll be lucky to get it down 10% over a month. That's a lot. You just got to be careful. You got to pay attention. So that's why you got to track your progress and stay motivated. How quickly you want to do these things. I've seen people drop a lot of weight quickly, but at the same time, you got to realize you're going to be weak. You're going to be vulnerable to sickness and everything else. So you got to be careful, especially during the winter. You got to think about this thing. When you're training for these things, you don't want to be when everybody's sick, because your immune system's going to be weaker. Because people don't realize how strict and how much bodybuilders have to go through to be able to get where they're at. But that's not what our goal is. Our goal is peak performance. We're going to perform, but I like to add in things like this, because it's interesting. These are interesting things to think about when you're setting your goals in the time of year, because when it gets spring down, everybody wants to get ripped, and so that's a specific goal. You got to figure out what ripped is, what measurement is. What your body fat needs to be ripped, and it's going to be at least 12% or below. You need to be below 10%. It's going to be quote unquote ripped. But you got to be flexible. You got to adjust your goals, and things are going to happen in between. So, you got to create a clear, achievable timeline for your progress. You got a little small victories all through there. It's how you practically apply all those training techniques, because, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen. Most of the time, you don't see what you did until a month later. So whatever you did in the previous month, you can see now. It really, for me, that's usually my cycle right there. I could tell 30 days later what I was doing 30 days before, how I look and feel. And and everybody's going to be different, but you got to be consistent. That's the main thing. I've been consistent for many, many years. Even when I had a broken leg, broken nose, and just broken up, scratched up, beat up, and everything else from a motorcycle wreck, I still managed to wobble my ass in there and work out. I'd take the crutches to go downstairs to go work out, go lift weights, because it meant that much to me, and that's what, people don't get sometimes, when we're looking at, achieving goals and your potential, in strength training. You've got clear, achievable goals. If you stay the same for years and years, obviously that's you're not progressing. But just kind of like me, I use maintenance workouts a lot of times to just maintain, because I don't want to get any bigger. I really don't want to get any smaller. At 205, I'm about right. When I get to 195, I'm pretty lean. You get down towards the 185 to 190 mark, extremely lean. But you have to be able to know where you're at, based on your height and weight. So that's where, the practical application from the last podcast, you can apply this stuff. You can, apply what you wrote down the last one. And so that link, was in the previous podcast. Go and you fill it out, And you look at it because, you're doing things like creating a consistent schedule, make sure that you can maintain it. It's like me. I mean, I do a lot of micro workouts. I'll do like little 10-minute spurts during the day while I'm doing other stuff, but I'll still get in, like 10 minutes here and there. I mean, you have to do what you have to do. But as we get to these training techniques, you'll see why these great bodybuilders and strength guys they are legends. You'll see based on their workouts why they are. But you got to stay consistent. You got to track your progress. You got to hold yourself accountable. You got to adapt to change. You got to, once you get to a plateau, you got to figure out where you want to go from there. People, that's where they get off in life and then, working out because there's so many similarities. There is so many similarities to being in the gym and working out and in life because, you got to be able to go through those things. But the gym has been the one consistent thing in my life for many years now. 20 plus years. I was 20. I don't know. I was probably 20 when I was really started being consistent. So the last 27 years, I've spent a significant amount of time in a gym or outside running or just working out. It's meant so much to my life and it's helped me be, definitely pretty high level. For 47 years old, I'm in great shape. My mind's in great shape. I wrote 52 best-selling books last year. I've got multiple, very highly rated podcasts. And so, I'm continuing to grow. I serve as a professor at a couple universities. I write courses. I do, all kinds of things for people. So, and I credit a lot of that to my level of fitness. But, you got to be able to be adaptable, And so when we look at the all-time greats and look at different methodologies, when we start, we got it. Mike Mentzer's heavy duty training. Now, this is a really interesting one right here because, he is the only person that ever, as far as I know, get a perfect score at the Olympia. His heavy duty training, is it's high intensity, but low volume. He believed in that shorter, more intense training sessions were more effective than the traditional high volume approaches. And see, I like that. The heavy duty is going to be one of the next things that I go through. As I'm going through these podcasts, working on these things, I'm going to try and see what my results are like. When I utilize the techniques, as we go through different things, just like the heart rate training, just like, the different pyramid training, other things we looked at in the last one. This time, we're going to look at these three great bodybuilders, and I'm going to, Mike Mentzer's. This is what I'm going to, incorporate the heavy duty again. I've used it before and it works, but it's different because you don't feel like you've done as much, but you have. It's kind of like it doesn't allow you to overtrain. It's simply lifting heavy weights for fewer sets. And it's just often just one or two exercises, but you perform it with maximum effort to muscle failure. And it's kind of like what I do in some of my high intensity workouts. I may do, let's say I do 4 plates. All right. I do 4 plates. All right. That's a lot of weight. It's just to be clear, it's a lot of weight, but I will do it until absolute failure. 3 plates, same thing. To absolute failure. And that's in my 3 rounds. And so first 2 rounds, I don't go to failure, but the last one I go to failure. And so, I get a lot of reps in too. And so it's it's what it is. But but Mike Mentzer, he wanted to focus on proper form, execution to the target muscles to avoid injury. And then he had a very, very strict diet. And he was also gifted with absolute unbelievable genetics. But when we look at Mike Mentzer, we look at it, we look at the practical application of the heavy duty. It's progressive overload. So you gradually increase the weight lifted to ensure continuous muscle adaptation. So you maintain strict form without sacrificing technique for the heavier loads. And so, you're progressively moving up in weight. He has limits per exercise. So now keep in mind now the 1 to 2 sets for his warm-ups I mean, these are warm-ups. So, you only have 1 to 2 all-out sets per exercise, but you have warm-ups in there. So you got to remember that when you read about it and look at that, there's warm-ups to where, you get adequate warm-up. Because, that's one thing that, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and they didn't really get the warm-up factor of it. You got to warm up, and so you have working sets to get ready, but then you're going to all-out failure. So, but you have to go with it to failure within 6 to 12 reps. So that means, number one, you got to know what your baseline is. Number two, you're doing 6 to 12 reps. You better have a good spotter or use hammer strength or something like that. Make sure you got a rack or something, because, when you're doing 1 to 2 all-out sets per exercise, I mean, that is heavy duty. I mean, you are really working your muscles. And I mean, you're hitting so many different systems by doing that, your neurological response, etc. I mean, it is heavy duty is strong, because he prioritizes recovery. And that's what I'm all about, recovery and not getting injured. That's what you try not to do that, because, I'd hurt my shoulder, my labrum many years ago. And, it's hard. I've got to get stem cells to regenerate it, here hopefully in the next few months. But I did what I didn't need to do. And I did it too many times, and I knew better. I paid for it. I've paid for it for years now. I have to do a lot of stretching, a lot of extra things. And so if I had been doing heavy duty, at that point, it wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have overdone it like that, because heavy duty requires longer recovery periods. You got to, allow 48 to 72 hours between sessions to make sure that you have proper recovery and growth. I mean, heavy duty, he selected compound movements. He focuses on stuff like deadlifts, squats, bench presses, and rows. They're multi-joint exercises, and they recruit more muscle fibers. So it yields better results. And then Mike Mentzer, obviously was, he tracked his progress and he measured, because, I mean, heavy duty is a real challenge. It looks like it's not that much, but I can assure you, once you dig into it and try it, it is. So I've got an example heavy duty workout. So an example one would be making sure you get to the right form, obviously, but you have let's say you're doing chest and back on day one. All right, so you do the bench press. You have 2 warm-up sets, which, I mean, you need to truly warm up. I mean, you need to be sweating, you have blood pumping, you need to be moving. You do one warm-up set, but then you do 1 working set to failure. So you have to fail between 6 and 12 reps. So you got to know what your number is. And number 2, you got to have a good spotter, because that could be a lot of weight for 6 to 12 reps, because it could be a lot of weight. So you got to make sure that you make sure you're not going to get injured. And then let's say you do the incline dumbbell. You do 1 working set to failure, because you're already warm now. And so you take the incline dumbbell press, 1 working set. Then you do pull-ups or lat pull-downs, 1 to 2 warm-up sets, and then 1 working set. And, I love lat pull-downs, but pull-ups are one of my favorite exercises, because I sucked so bad at them. I was so terrible at pull-ups. I mean, I was awful. And now my most I ever got, I got up to almost 40. And then I stopped pushing them as hard. I've got to go back to see how many I can get, because, I wanted to try to be able to get 50 consecutive. But, and most people can't even do a pull-up. So you got to remember that when you're doing these things. But think about that, though, when you're doing, if you were doing the heavy duty, we do pull-ups or lat pull-downs, you're going to do working sets to make sure you're fully warm, make sure you're moving, and then 1 set to failure, everything you can do. And then you do like one working set of barbell rows. You're done, all right? Nothing. You don't touch anything until day 3. So then let's say that's on Wednesday. Then you do legs. You can do leg press or squats. I like to do leg press. People like squats. All right. So you do 1 to 2 warm-up sets, and then 1 working set to failure. Nice. Leg curls, 1 working set to failure. Standing calf raises, 1 working set to failure. And again, it doesn't sound like much until you do it. So, you got to remember, think about it on leg press, okay? All right, I can do believe it was like 870 or something like that, 820, 50 to 75 times. And so that puts me at like 2,500 pounds or so, or 2,600 pounds is my max for the leg presses. So to do one working set of 6 to 12, I mean, I'm going to have to fill that machine up, you know? And so after I warm up, I'm going to have to fill that thing all the way up because I do 16 at plates, 16 plates plus the weight of the leg press, 50 to 75 pounds times, no problem. I mean, no problem. I mean, I fail somewhere between 50 and 75 times. And so even doubling that weight, I still would only fail between 25 to 35 times. And so, you know, I'd have to figure out what I'm going to do on that one, you know, but I'm not a typical. No, I mean, that's atypical. Most people are, you're not going to be able to do that. Don't even try it because it's going to get you hurt. But I've always had that strength. Even when I was, you know, first started when I was really young, I mean, I could still leg press 1,000 plus pounds many times. Always had really strong legs. But then if you go to day 5, all right, overhead barbell press, 1 to 2 warm up sets, 1 working set. Lateral raises, 1 working set to failure. Dumbbell or barbell curls, 1 working set to failure. And so finding that rep range is going to be, you know, right on, finding the right amount of weights to be able to get 6 to 12. Because, I mean, with the dumbbell curls, I mean, I do sets of, with 50 pounds, I do sets of 10, 12, 15. So, I mean, I'd have to go up to 75 plus pounds in each hand to be able to do that to a working failure set. Tricep push downs, I can do the whole machine. So 1 working set to failure is going to be a lot of reps, but that's the next one. I mean, that's a lot of reps. I mean, I end up doing the whole machine probably 40, 50 times. I mean, whatever the whole rack is. So, and I'm not that strong compared to a lot of people, but I am in the top 1% overall. So, I mean, I'm not, you know, again, I don't land my, you know, I'm an author. I write it, I practice it. We practically apply this stuff, and, you know, we work it, you know. I mean, it's thing, you know. This is my life. This is the things that I love, and they're very dear to me. You know, I love working out. I love exercise. I love lifting weights. You know, it's meant so much to my life in so many ways, and so, you know, it's helped me get more out of myself, way more out of myself than I ever would have any other way. You know, and I can, you know, it's so you got to realize, you got to think about these things, and so we start looking at Arnold Schwarzenegger's workout. So we go from Mike Mentzer to Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so he has the double split, which is going to be a progressive overload, but it's a double split every day. So it's super high volume. There's a lot of variety in there. You're doing a lot of high reps. You're definitely working on that mind-muscle connection because, I mean, this is hard. And you do supersets and drop sets. And this is what I used to do. And I still do a lot of drop sets and a lot of supersets, but I used to follow a lot of Arnold stuff. And, you know, a guy used to joke, you know, always call me, you know, always call me Arnold and stuff. And anyway, it was just, you know, it was his name for me. I don't know if he even knew my name, but that's what he called me. But I did, you know, I followed the double split. And I could tell, you know, and it really works. I mean, an example week, Monday and Thursday, you're going to do chest and back. So you bench press 4 sets of 10 reps. So you're working sets. So you got to do a working set to get warmed up. You go into that 4 sets of 10. Then you do pull-ups. You do 4 sets to failure. I mean, failure, like failure. And so you're already gassed by then. And so then you do your incline dumbbell press, 4 sets of 10. Then your barbell rows, 4 sets of 10. So you see you're going from chest to back. And so in cable crossovers, one of my favorites. Now, 4 sets of 12, I'd have to put a lot of weight on there because I do sets of 50 with, you know, 100 plus pounds. So I don't know. We'll have to figure that one out when I do this one, but I'm going to do this one as well. And then for your back deadlifts, 3 sets of 12. So you're warmed up. You make sure you warm up. Boom. All right. Then you go to your Tuesday and Friday, shoulders and arms. You know, and you change these things up, you know, around, you know, time to time. You change them up, but these are pretty good staples right here. I used to follow this pretty good. But you got your overhead barbell press, or, you know, an overhead type press. Then you have lateral raises, 4 sets of 12. Then curls, 4 sets of 10. Tricep dips, I love them. Do 4 sets to failure. And that really works the triceps. Preacher preacher curls, skull crushers. I mean, I used to follow this, like I said, to a T. And then you have leg and abs. So you have squats, 4 sets of 10, leg press, 4 sets of 12, Romanian deadlifts, 4 sets of 10, seated calf raises, 4 sets of 15, hanging leg raises, 4 sets to failure. And those hanging leg raises will get you. And then you have crunches, 4 sets of 25, which, back before I'd heard, I really hurt something a few years ago running, but I used to do 500 to 2,000 reps abs every time I would go to the gym. I'd finish up at that. I got to get back to doing that again, but I'd hurt something down there, and I had to be more careful. But this is a very good workout. He would rest on Sunday, but it's more than a routine because it requires a lot. Because I mean, when you think about this, you're doing Monday and Thursday, you're doing chest and back. Tuesday, Friday, shoulders and arms. Wednesday and Saturday, legs and abs. So you're always, that'd be the 6-day split. I mean, if you did the double split, you would do the legs in the morning. I believe it's the legs in the morning, and then your chest at night. Then you do your back, then your shoulders and arms on the next day, and then you'd switch them all around. But this is the 6-day split, but the double split is very effective, and it's even more volume than this. And then the last one we'll look at is Ronnie Coleman. And I mean, he did heavy compound lifts. I mean, when you see Ronnie Coleman compared to some of your modern day bodybuilders, I mean, Ronnie Coleman lifted weight. So, I mean, his was heavy compound lifts, and I mean, he lifted weight. And I mean, what an awesome guy. I mean, he, obviously doing squats, deadlifts, etc. He used progressive overload. He used high volume training, just like Arnold. He used more high volume to where Mike Mentzer used it, use your low volume heavy working, but he also, but Mentzer also work it, focus way more on his diet, because when you're doing all these heavy lifts, you're burning a lot of calories. And so your diet doesn't have to be as on point as it does for Mike Mentzer's work. But Ronnie did split training, obviously, he had an unbelievable work ethic. And, he would do similar. He'd do back and biceps on Monday, Tuesday, chest, triceps, quads and hamstrings on Wednesday, shoulders Thursday, back and biceps again on Friday, Saturday, chest, triceps, and calves, which that's always a good day right there. And then Sunday would be a light rest or recovery. But, when we look at all these, some may sound the same and similar, but they're all different. I mean, these are all ways you can practically apply, and you can utilize these workouts. You can use them to grow muscle. I mean, get leaner, to get stronger, but more than anything, to help your life. I mean, to help, to be able to transform and, enable peak performance in your life, increase your energy, your focus, your resilience, because I promise you follow any of those trainings, those schedules, I mean, you're going to have to work. I mean, that's the thing about it. Nobody does that work for you. You have to do it yourself. But I'm going to have a sheet. It's going to be attached. It's going to be, again, there's a link that's going to be in the podcast description. You can open it up, you can download it, you can look at it, but it's going to be where, you can see those different workouts. You can see the practical application and be able to, essentially, go in and see how you can practically apply these schedules to you. But there's also, places like bodybuilding.com and, Body Space, and different places where you can find a lot of these workouts as well. So I just like to talk about them because it's interesting, because, people just don't see all the levels of peak performance that go in to working out, to strength training, to really pushing yourself. But, it's made a gigantic difference in my life, and it can definitely make a difference in your life, even if you've not got started yet. Get started, do something. You got to get started first, get moving. But anyway, my name's Brad Young. This has been the Peak Performance Podcast. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.